Hi, Matt.
Hi, hello everyone. So I'm excited to talk here. I kind of feel a bit like Ricky Bobby in Talladega Nights. I really don't know what to do with my hands, so I'm trying to keep them under the screen, playing with a marker. But this is the second time I have an opportunity to speak at RJI. I think the first time was 2 or 3 years ago during the Journalytics Summit. And with this focus being around collaboration, I thought it would be good to kind of share a presentation with you around how we're building a collaborative analytics culture at Scripps, and how that really has very little to do with the data and everything to do with the people and making sure we get everyone in the right room, get all the right people in the room. So kind of going to the next slide here, you can kind of see, being data-driven is something that continues to be a theme in our conversations. It continues to be a theme when we talk about decision making. And at Scripps, we had a general problem that there was a perception or sentiment that data was not driving our decision making. We were publicly wondering with each other, do we have access to the data we need to be informed? And are we using the best metrics to evaluate our business? And the reality was, we had both. It turned out that we had a perception problem, meaning that we probably were doing better than we realized, but in the same breath, we definitely had a data problem. And so we had to sit down and really figure out how we were going to come together and really begin to collaborate around our data and really begin to sort of fulfill that promise of being data-driven. Probably the best opportunity we had to do this was with our executive board report. So historically, the board report process, we could kind of jump to slide 5 here, was incredibly stressful. It was a mess. It was filled with anxiety. We were having questions. Do we have the right data? Were the numbers themselves right? At some point, we sat down and asked ourselves, is this really the best we can do? We are having all of these meetings, sharing all of these emails. We had this elevated stress around this entire process where we just kind of felt like, are we doing this in a way that's serving A, our executive team and understanding what's going on with our business, but B, are we serving ourselves in terms of doing this in a way that allows us to kind of carry on with managing the business, but in the same breath, really kind of delivering the message? And so what we really decided on was we really examined what we're calling a participatory decision-making model. And so my experience had told us that the data really wasn't the problem. That was our participation with the data. It was our relationship with the data. And so what we really did was we embarked on a 4-step process to really kind of harness the people in the organization to help us make sense of the data and really begin to arrive at the types of decisions that we wanted to make. And so this 4-step process, started with gaining full participation of everyone, establishing mutual understanding, crafting inclusive solutions, and then finally providing sustainable results back to the business. So, when we talk about step 1, gaining full participation. When we think about being data-driven, a lot of times we think of someone or a team sitting in a room or in a far-off corner of the office with a spreadsheet or dashboard making quote-unquote data-driven decisions. But for us, we realized that being data-driven kind of contained 3 scenarios. One, we had analysts that were the closest to the data, had the easiest access to the data, working with spreadsheets, working with visualizations, and kind of really surfacing a lot of the things that were going on in the business. We had a second group of people, which were functional managers, and they were getting reports from the analysts. Maybe they had dashboards that they were getting access to. And then we had a third group of people that was basically the leadership team who were trying to use operational data, financial data, product data, and sales reports to kind of really understand what's happening with our business and the types of things we needed to do going forward to be successful while still fulfilling that promise of being data-driven. Oh, and we had meetings, tons and tons of meetings. And so we really decided if we were really going to become data-driven, it was really this debate between some hypothetical challenge or this abstract idea of being data-driven, which I think a lot of organizations struggle with, or finding something very specific. And in this case, we use the board report as a very specific scenario to figure this out. Because at Scripps, we operate on this concept called broad discernment, which says you need to maintain a long-term, realistic, big picture view of what's going on. And so for us, being realistic was this situation with the board report was not sustainable if we're going to be successfully managing the business. And so what we did, if you kind of jump down here to slide 9, we came together, we said, we're smart, we can fix this, so come to this meeting. And so I scheduled a meeting, and it was basically the analyst folks, those functional managers, and leadership, and we said, we can do better, let's get behind something specific, and in this case, let's fix the problem we have with bringing together all of the information we need to generate the executive board report. And so we got in a room, and I will say that this meeting was absolutely brutal. It was one of the hardest meetings I've ever had. It was like 7:30 in the morning. We had called ourselves together before the workday had started and said, we have to solve this problem. And the first thing we realized was we were operating off 66 different revenue metrics, 22 different audience metrics, and we had zero agreement on what any of these things meant. And so again, we had meetings, lots and lots of meetings, but we realized that the good news here is that we could eliminate some problems here. When we finally sat down and began talking, and we realized we had all of this data, it was an obscene amount of data, we realized that access was not a problem. And so that we could mentally begin to kind of set that issue aside and say, well, if we're able to bring 66 revenue metrics and 22 audience metrics to a meeting, the problem here isn't the data. The problem here is we don't have agreement on what any of this means. And so we just basically got together and engaged in a process that I referred to as the data dictionary, which was how we were going to build consensus and mutual understanding about the metrics. So we had gone ahead and renamed some products in 2015 because people were confused in 2014. And we can honestly say that didn't make the problem better. It only made it worse because people were just getting used to what we were calling things, and we went ahead and changed it again. But the reality was that it was a hard process, but coming together and sort of allowing everyone to say, well, when I hear these terms or I'm thinking of these metrics, this is the definition I have in my mind. And so people were able to spend time listening to each other and really kind of seeing, hey, wait a minute, I might not own this metric, but I have responsibility in this organization understanding what that means, and I have responsibility to communicating on behalf of anyone what that metric means. And I think it also helped, mutual understanding was also improved because people began to understand what was important to each different area of the business. And so we engaged in this process, we sat in a room, we realized it was really difficult, we were not speaking the same language, and it was clear that we needed to do something about that. And coming out of this was this sort of laundry list of metrics and what they really meant to the business and how we define them and where we source them and how that all came together. And I can tell you that was not fun. People questioned the need. They didn't see it as their responsibility. They sort of saw it as an analyst thing. But once they sort of got together and realized how this could be simplified, we started to see buy-in and appreciation for what people were dealing with. And so I think then when it kind of comes, and we can jump to slide 11 here, on step 3, crafting inclusive solutions, I think, this is where we sort of look at this as analytics and the analyst to the rescue. The instinct is to say, let's set some top-level KPIs, let's simplify the discussion. As analysts and sort of analytics teams and those working with data, you have to resist this temptation. If you don't go through the process of getting buy-in and establishing all of that mutual understanding, the analyst can't just swoop down and impose metrics on the business and start telling people what's important and what's not important. We had to have a guiding principle. And so in this case, because we were working on that executive board report, we knew what stories we wanted to tell about our business and about our performance. And so by simplifying that and just simply asking a question of what do you need to tell that story, we realized really quickly, and you can go to the next slide, that we really only needed about 12 revenue metrics and 8 audience metrics to really tell this story. And that's what we had in common. And so while that's still probably like too many, and too many in a classical analytics. You should have 3 or 1 KPI driving your business. We realized that with 20, everyone was accounted for, and that this was a much simpler situation than the 88 we had before. And so kind of now with this new alignment, where we have, the 12 revenue metrics, the 8 audience metrics, we had a team. And we had one group of people that was aligned around this. And so the idea was then, okay, how do we sustain this? And so what we're able to do from a sustainability standpoint is really look at our business here in step 4. We were looking at quarterly board report deliverables. But then it was really simple for us to say, where else does this need to happen in our business? If we start with these 20 metrics, can we work our way back to monthly understanding of our business, weekly understanding of our business, daily understanding of our business, and in what different contexts could these 20 metrics be reapplied in these different areas of our business to kind of start to really begin to piece together what we needed? Did we need different reporting formats? Did we need dashboards? And so what we were able to kind of rally around was this idea of a digital data center. And what this digital data center is a consistent and convenient resource where the team can kind of access the information that we need. And we know it's the right stuff because we went through that difficult process of having those meetings, going through the conversation about whether or not people see this as their responsibility, getting people to speak the same language, getting people invested in inclusive solutions, realizing that we all had metrics that we shared in common and that we could use those to kind of really build out around what we were pulling together. And so now with this sort of consistent delivery of data, convenient delivery of data, I think we've been able to kind of step in through people getting together and talking through what's going on with their business, a really good sense of being data driven. And so I think, for us and what I found really exciting about some of the work that we've done over the last year is that people were driving our ability to be data driven, and the ability for people to come together and kind of talk through different issues they have and participate in the process has really what's kind of delivered us sustainable results. And we're really excited about that. And as painful as it was, we're really glad that we went through that process. And that's something that I wanted to share with you today, was that process that we had followed to kind of come together and become more data-driven in our decision-making. So that's all I have for you today. I know I wanted to keep it brief. I think I had 20 minutes. I've used 15 of those. So I think, are we going to open it up to questions or comments?
I think we can do that. And while I'm waiting for hands to go up, journalists don't necessarily love numbers and don't love to necessarily get into the numbers. And even though we realize, right, that those numbers give us great insights in terms of audience and that kind of thing. And that seems to be shifting more and more as I look at your step 4 from quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily to now almost situationally sometimes making decisions. And do you see that migration being equally difficult?
You know what? No. And I think the reason is because we focused on the stories that we needed to tell about how our business was performing. So just like as you would be in a journalistic context, trying to piece together the pieces of the narrative that you sort of want to thread through that to kind of tell a story, we knew that there were certain ways that we wanted to go about talking about how our business was performing. And so I think that was probably the key part, was understanding that this board report was basically 7 or 8 different people writing different sections, and no one had ever seen the other person's section. And so that was something that we changed, where we said, let's bring all those sections together and let's talk about, what do you need? What do you talk about when you're talking about our products? What are you talking about when you're talking about our revenue performance? What are you talking about when we're talking about our marketing? And we realized really quickly that a lot of those same things were in a lot of those different stories. And so once we focused on those stories that they were writing, we were able to kind of piece that together and say, this is what we have in common. Do we have the same shared definition of those terms? Once we realized that we were pretty close, but maybe needed to tweak them on the edges, we were able to say, okay, well, yeah, now we can come together and do this on a regular basis because it's been streamlined and everyone understands everyone else's perspective as well.
You said you pared down your analytics to about 20. Can you describe some of those that remain that you're using as an entity?
Yeah, so I mean, we're a local business, so a lot of, you can kind of see up here, one of them is local sessions. So we really tried to focus on what was going on in the markets we operate, as opposed to just sort of trying to talk about the aggregate audience that we had. So that was something that's incredibly important to us. And we knew that, but we were still keeping a lot of all of those different audience metrics. And we realized really quickly that we could sort of make a lot of those secondary, because we knew that our businesses operate in our markets, and consistent with our mission and being in those markets, we knew that that's where our priority should have been. So that's an example of that. From a revenue standpoint, I mean, I think it's a lot of the same things that we traditionally look at as publishers, in terms of the health of our business and the revenue associated with our business. So we look at CPMs, we look at the effective CPMs of certain things. We're looking at revenue per users and things like that. But I think the key here was recognizing that we didn't need the full breadth of everything just to cover it off to say that we had it. Because once we realized that everyone was using similar things or talking about metrics in similar ways, it was really easy for us to just say, hey, all that promo stuff and all of that sort of those inventory-based metrics, those are deeper operational metrics. We can kind of set those aside and focus more on the monetization that we're doing in our business, especially when we're reporting up to the executives. And then we're able to pick some of those things that we set aside that had become maybe cluttering up the quarterly discussion, found really convenient places in daily and weekly discussions. And so some of that sort of then cascaded back down into some of those other contexts that we were operating in.
Other questions?
Does that help?
Matt, you kind of went from client side, agency side to news side, and I'm wondering what insights that you have learned, or maybe could have extrapolated that maybe you could impart to our audience, because we have a lot of different people in the room, right?
Yeah.
About things that you're seeing that are helpful, hopeful, anything like that.
I hate to say it, one of the things that was always common was, revenues and money. If you wanted to get people's attention, particularly when we're talking about data, make sure that the data has a relationship to the finances. And that's true for every business. And that was probably the one thing. And I think the other thing is starting off, in journalism and then kind of going the agency side and making my way back. Are the stories, right? Even if you're writing a report, there's a story to be told, right? There's a situation that the business is in. There's something that's complicating that business. And then as managers, you're making a decision to resolve that. And so that very simple situation, complication, resolution sort of framework is, that's, you want the data to help sort of fill in that narrative. And I think, if you're writing a story or writing an inverted pyramid style, I think the parallels are just, they're there. They're sort of sometimes hard to see, but those structures that I think are inherent in how we want to tell our stories is prevalent, whether you're writing a story about some event that occurred in town, or you're trying to tell a story about how the business faced a challenge last quarter and you were able to overcome it with some sound decision making.
Terrific. Matt Booher from Scripps, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.